Good afternoon. Welcome to this very special Honey Pot in Conversation as we celebrate 15 years of Adelaide of Honey Pot. My name is Andy Beecroft. I'm the Marketplace Manager. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge we're meeting here today on Ghana country, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We've got a very amazing panel today. So it's called Debunk, the Hustle and Pitch, which is essentially we're going to unravel and examine the kind of friendly, accessible nature of Fringe and Honey Pot as a marketplace, and give you kind of a context as to how easy and navigable it is when you bring work here and you're also seeking work. So we've got a selection of artists and a delegate as well who will give you their anecdotes and their opinions on their experiences here. So it's my great pleasure to welcome the chair today, Henry Naylor. Hello. And hello, everybody. I'll throw you over to Henry and we'll begin. Thank you very much.
Hi folks, nice to meet you. I'm Henry. I'm a playwright, an ex-comedian who did stand-up comedy for about 15 years, and now I'm writing plays and I'm performing one this year. There we go. Oh, sorry. And this is Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a choreographer, performer, and producer, and doing a few different things this year's Fringe.
And hi, I'm Chris Bendall. I am a producer, in my context being here, but also a director and playwright and dramaturg, and wear lots of hats, literally and figuratively. I run a touring company called Critical Stages Touring, which is the main hat I'm wearing when I come here.
Hi everyone, my name is Thomas Fonua, also known as Kween Kong. I am a director, choreographer, and a dickhead. I do a lot of shows, and I run a collective called the House of Kong.
It's lovely to meet you all, folks. One of the things that excites me all about you as a panel is that you're all creatives as well as producers. So it's one of those curious things, I think, to do this job for any length of time. I think you have to have a hyphen in your job title. You've got to multitask, really. And one of the things that I really enjoy about going to the Honey Pot is sort of seeing things both with a producer's hat and with a performer's hat, and working out what works. Do you mind if I start with you, Chris? Because you are here as a delegate to the Honey Pot this time. You're a highly successful dramaturg in your own right. An award winner, no less. But you're here booking acts for Critical Stages. And you tend to take a lot of acts touring around Australia. What do you look at people approaching at the Honey Pot and thinking they've got their pitch all wrong? I used to do that when I was doing more of the creative stuff. What makes a good pitch for you?
Great question. So when I'm at Honey Pot, I am, as you say, having conversations both ways. So, we're looking at going, well, there's lots of people in town, so I might be having a conversation about the work that we've got with a festival or, presenter in town. But also hoping that artists will talk to us and talk to me about work that they want us to collaborate with. What makes a great pitch? I think, just really getting to the nub of what's unique about the show, about your work. Just what's how to get that elevator pitch, to hook your attention. Because Honey Pot is not the kind of place where you're getting a 5-minute pitch. It's running into someone and being able to have in a sentence something enough to catch your attention, and then sit down and have a coffee or have a drink or get you to see the show to then have it. So you've got to kind of have that hook to make you go, I've never heard of that. Never heard of something like that before. That's something that I need to see, because that sounds like that's a complete unique proposition. But then, then be able to follow it through with the show or the conversation or the whatever,
Yeah, it starts with the show.
But it has to start with the show, doesn't it? You've got to get enough hook to kind of go and see the show. And then if there are times, in the Fringe in this context, half the people you meet, you've just missed. I always find I've just missed their show. So then there is at least a little bit more chance to go, well, what was it? How did it go? What was unique about it? And what would it work for our context? And for me, because we're interested in regional touring, the thing for me is to kind of go, why is this something that's interesting and has resonance and is relevant to a broader audience, like to an across Australia audience or a New Zealand or something, So how does that lift out of the kind of wonderful particular beast that is a Fringe festival, and how could that then sit in all sorts of different contexts around the country? Because that's straight away where my brain's going. I'm like, I might enjoy this now, but is that about here? So how would this then sit in Bathurst and Cairns and Darwin and and would it? And if it would, why?
And do people tend to? Can I throw this one to you, Thomas? I mean, sort of, do you have to adapt your act according to different audiences? Are there certain places you wouldn't even bother touring?
Well, that's the thing, because like I'm kind of a shapeshifter in terms of an artist. Like I operate in drag a lot, especially in this context. But my original sort of where I come from is contemporary dance, and so depending on the audience that we're working with, it really dictates not only just the style of performance that I'll be offering, but also like the song choice. If it's a spot number, I wouldn't bring like a gangster rap song to a audience in the cabaret setting. You know what I mean? So I'm like, you have to be really selective and also know the demographic and know what will reach and what will read. And so yeah, totally shape-shifting.
And Erin, you have an extraordinary number of disciplines that you work with. I mean, you've got a fabulous show called Egg at the moment. How would you go around pitching Egg to somebody like Chris at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think Egg for me was a kind of combination of a similar and very, very different. I began in contemporary dance as my main discipline, but have always been interested in other avenues. And I made Egg as a Fringe show. I made it during isolation. I made it with the intention of wanting a show that could tour. I committed to having no sets and props, but then build a giant egg costume, which I still don't know how exactly I'm going to get that on a plane. But the intention was to make a Fringe show because I really love the Fringe environment. And again, coming from contemporary dance, which is slightly different theatres and contexts, as an independent, I love the accessibility of Fringe and I love the community behind it as well. I think, the access to different artists really excites me. So I guess Egg was a show specifically made with the intention of wanting to be able to tour it in Fringe festivals, and then hopefully other spaces as well. So was supposed to take it to Melbourne and Sydney last year, wasn't able to do that. But I guess with all of that in mind, it was a work that was made particularly of where I am at now. Egg is a show about deciding whether you want to have children when I was single at the time. I'm now dating the sound designer of the show, which was like a great plot twist. Single, 32, and deciding whether you might want to have children one day. And I think having done a season last year, if I was pitching it, I was really fortunate that season last year went really well, sold out, got awards and different things. So I guess as far as a pitch goes, I would be kind of finding what the urgency of the show is. I think there's so many shows that are incredible. So sort of trying to talk about that this is something that really resonated with people. And yeah, that would be my starting point for a pitch.
It's very interesting. You're talking about the context of a COVID world. Do you think audiences at this particular time are demanding a certain type of show? I mean, it was straight after the Second World War. People were so much sick of tragedy and fighting and conflict. Musicals became a big thing. Do you think we're having to tailor our pitches to people at the Honey Pot with that in mind, with a new world order?
Well, I reckon we should be. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be really. I mean, I don't. I mean, it's just me, but I certainly wasn't expecting we'd be seeing year 3 of COVID, but we are. But certainly, even when it started, I was, and I actually started finding out about the last time we had a global pandemic, 100 years ago, and it's like, well, suddenly the Roaring 20s made a whole lot more sense than I'd really ever thought about before. And I do think we're going to find we're in the Roaring 20s again once we can actually take our masks off. But until then, also, we're still, I've been having a number of conversations about this with people over the last couple of days about the kind of work where people are interested in. I think there was a period mid last year where lots of people were saying, "Oh, we just want to go back to the same hard-hitting political or contemporary. I want to see the same sort of stuff that I've always wanted to see." And that changed in Australia at least late last year. After 5 months of lockdown in Sydney, no one wanted to go back to the same stuff they were seeing before. You need to have a comedy in Sydney. Last five months of lockdown in Sydney killed the city. So no one wants to go back and see. Like there are shows that died in January because they were too dark. and no one knew what sort of state we would be in. And I think the same is true in Melbourne. I don't know, maybe it's different here. And I think you'll find different reactions in different places. But we need to have hope now. And I don't want to hear about a show that hasn't got hope at the end right now. I wouldn't approach someone with it. We need to be thinking about instilling, encouraging people to come back to the theatre. I think everyone's going to be different, and some people, are still going to want to have a topic about the urgent things that are in the world. I certainly want to still make work about the urgent things that are happening in the world right now, because God knows there's a lot of them. But I think we need to have that with a sense of going, let's just remember who we're talking to right now and the context that we're talking to them in it, So it's how we kind of balance that. I think that's the interesting thing.
I totally agree, and I think also too, as an artist speaking, not only have audiences shifted, but so have us as artists. I think, right. Coming out of the theatre, like Erin said, we're both from contemporary dance, and I was working for, one of the.
Sorry. Could you say that again?
Oh, don't apologise. It's okay.
Siri
Just
has
don't
something
cut
to
me
say.
up again, Siri.
I've now switched you off.
Yeah. But coming from contemporary dance as well as being in a theatre, which is definitely a fourth wall. For myself, I really leaned into drag because I just don't want to be. I want to have conversations with people. I want to include the audience and have a dialogue and be open. And I think artistically now where I'm at after COVID, we didn't have it as bad here in Adelaide, but we did have the divide, not being able to see loved ones, not being able to physically touch people. It's really changed us, and my game as a dancer, I'm very physical, so not being able to work with people in that way has been so counterintuitive, and also changed my process creatively. So yeah.
So do you think audiences are becoming more interactive at the moment because people are now just desperate for the human connection after lockdown?
I think so. Yeah, I think definitely interactive, but I think they just want to be included. That's how I feel when I watch shows.
So, yeah. And that's why I think the year changed a lot, because so the first wave for Australia was pretty. We just went on. We watched it happen in the rest of the world, and we went into our lockdown, but didn't really touch us in the same way. And early last year, I was surprised about the number of shows that were happening in Sydney that weren't interactive, because I personally went in craving the thing that I'd missed on Zoom, which was to talk. It was like the thing that, and I was surprised about the number of shows where the fourth wall came down. And I expect a lot of that was about COVID safety measures going out of control. But I was like, I don't want the fourth wall anymore. I've come back to the theatre to interact with you. But then, it's interesting now to see how that works. I'm encouraged if we kind of still want to have that and we have that interactivity, because I assume after so long of digital, that's what we're craving.
Have you found this as well, Erin?
I think that when I know for me as an audience, I'm not taking it for granted as much. Previous Fringes, I would go and see shows every night and not even think about the privilege of what that actually was. So I think, interactive can be a number of things. It can be like an actually interactive show, or just acknowledging that the audience is there. And I think that's why we're seeing, it's for me, I'm finding such a thrill going to shows and being like, I'm in the room with artists. And I think, back to what you were saying before about the kind of work that we're making, if I think about my artistic practice, I do think there's a way we can acknowledge and hold the grief and the challenge of what is now and still bring our artistry. I mean, that's what the arts has done forever. So, I ended up making a comedy show, which is not something from contemporary dance. We don't do comedy very often. But it wasn't even really.
See, actually, as far as your pitch, that's a great place to start, isn't it?
There you go.
I think that's the bit that's hooked me now.
That in
what's the unique proposition, really, isn't it? I'm a contemporary dancer. This is the first time I've done comedy. We're like, okay, great.
Yeah, and it was delightful, and it wasn't intentional, but great for the pitch. But it was just what I wanted to do. I'd just come out of a show, another solo show called Femme, which got to tour, and a little bit, it sort of just got in, and then COVID happened. And that was a pretty intense solo show. This one, I still can't stay away from looking and exploring experiences of the feminine and that kind of thing. But I just needed some comedy for my own sake. And my intention with that show, the making and the producing and the doing of it, was that I wanted to try and experience some joy in it, and not in this kind of like, it has to be, la la. But it was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to find where the joy still is, whilst also exploring some pretty heavy themes and some challenges. And I think, there's any number of ways you can be making art at the moment, but just from my own process, it was like, I need some lightness in amongst it all. And egg costume's a pretty good way to do that. It's hard to take yourself seriously when you're dressed as an egg.
I'm going back to your comment about getting on the plane. I just think, can you sit in the plane wearing the egg
I
costume?
can't sit in the suit. It's very round. But look, maybe there's a travel version. Egg goes on tour. I could pack a lot more in there as well, actually. Although that sounds dodgy, but
just make a headdress. Like, it'd be fine. Like
yeah.
a big headdress.
Yeah.
So you feel then that at this time we need to be more light-hearted with our material? Is that? I mean, can I? Thomas, I mean, so like you're doing loads of shows at this festival.
As I said, I'm a dickhead. I do a lot. Yeah. And
No,
what happened was, like,
with
Honey Pot as well, like I think, the great thing about this resource is that, for performers like ourselves, it is a process for us to really learn the other side of being the performer, being the artist, but also like a migration pattern for us to learn how to also take control of our stories, and produce works that we believe in. And I think with the stories that I'm talking about with my works, like usually speaking, I make work that is really hard hitting and really heavy because I'm a heavy person. Naturally, I'm very heavy, especially in drag. But I think my practice has changed a lot. It's not necessarily lighthearted. I think the way that I've packaged my work, I've been a lot more careful. Careful is not the right word. I've just been a lot more strategic about the messages and how I weave them into the practice. Right. And I think in turn, it's really opened up my perspective, but allowed audience members to attach their own versions of their stories onto things when usually my work was super self-indulgent, to be completely honest, and I was very unapologetic about it. My contemporary work, yeah.
But can I just I mean, you've got how many? You've got 3 different shows on, haven't you?
There's 4 shows that I'm producing,
and
choreographing, making, yeah.
And can you tell the difference in tone in what an audience is demanding? Are some of those shows more popular than others because of what audiences are expecting? I mean, one of the shows sort of more heavier than some of the others, and are those not doing as well? Or
yeah, well, I think it's like the works, because I am a shapeshifter. I think each work is to a specific type of audience. So my solo show, Brown Sissy Boy, has really heavy themes. It's like unpacking sort of years of trauma as well as being of color in this industry and trying to forge a pathway. Like there's a certain audience that will appeal to that. Obviously there's a cabaret, there's drag, there's Queen Kong, and usually yes, people will come a lot more to that kind of a show because it is airy, it's light, it's fun. But the themes that I explore in Brown Sissy Boy are still very much prevalent, in my cabaret shows as well. They're just like a poppy track as opposed to a really sad track. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so it's essentially the same thing, the same perspective, just a different audience and what people want to see. Yeah, I think they're all successful in their own right, just very different parts of my personality.
Because like part of the problem, I think, when you're pitching stuff to presenters at this stage, is that they're booking for a year in advance. So what is right for now might not be right for a year's time. And so there's a bit of crystal ball gazing. Yeah. You're having to, when you're pitching a show, you're thinking what will work in 2023. And it's probably going to have to be even more light and silly. There's, the way it's going in Europe, there'll be a nuclear war as well as COVID. And so it'll be all...
I mean, I think the way I look at that, there's, as you say, you are crystal ball gazing, but we can probably see where it's going. Or we can see... and in some ways you get surprised, presenters, if you're thinking, if you're not seeing kind of what this year might have been like, at least last year, to an extent, you kind of go, well, what were going to be dominant themes? What are the issues we need to talk about? There are big issues that we want to talk about. So there's a certain amount of crystal ball gazing, and there's a certain amount of kind of really finding, and the things that you're talking about are kind of key conversation points that we're going to have. But yeah, the way that we talk about, I think that as far as a pitch in this kind of context for Honey Pot, what we want to be, the best thing to be doing is to be asking presenters, bookers, festivals, whatever, what they're finding, exactly the conversation you're having now, and asking them, so, how are audiences feeling? What are audiences enjoying? What are audiences looking for at the moment? Because it's intel gathering, which is the amazing thing. And as I think what you said is really interesting, that as you, develop, as you're, and I'm the same, as you develop your practice as producers and artists, you realize that the most important thing you can do in these contexts is actually less talking about yourself and more finding out about audiences and finding out what people are interested in.
Yeah. What's your experience of Honey Pot then, Erin? Have you got, when you've been pitching there in the past, have you found, well, how have you generally found the experience?
I mean, leading on from what you were sort of saying before, I think it's a difficult balance. I would say that I've been involved in Honey Pot probably over the last 5 or 6 years with Femme and Egg, and before then just as an independent artist. And I think when I first went in, I was like, right, I've got to go in and get my show booked, which is like a pretty normal thought process. It's like, I'm here to book shows. And what I kind of learned and am learning still is that it's a longer game, particularly now. So I would say that the opportunities that have come out of Honey Pot, maybe one has come out of the actual Honey Pot hive where I sat down and spoke to someone and it resulted in something. But really what it does is gets you talking to people. And I now have 3 or 4 years of seeing those people at hives, and they might never book my work, or they might, but it's that longer relationship that I find really satisfying as well, because as a solo work performer, I don't have much of a team around me. And then also, so you start to feel like there's a community and an industry around you, and you can kind of have those conversations. So that's probably been the main learning curve for me with Honey Pot. But also just wanted to say as well, in terms of the type of work we're making, I still think it's important as artists that we make the work we want to make. And then I think it's more about the strategy of how you communicate how it will land. So yes, of course, as an artist, I'm thinking about what audiences want, and that has a certain impact on what I make, but I still think that it's really important that we make the work and then find the right contexts to present it, as well as being aware of bigger trends.
Look, that's right. I'm thinking in that sense, it's more as like, a presenter or producer booking something, thinking about what's relevant for your audience. But, you can only make the work that is relevant to you.
And it can be a real trap if you get too caught. And, I have to say with Honey Pot, sometimes it really puts you in that kind of strategic, almost to a fault
so
mode.
I'll make the show that you want right now. Sure, you want one of those? I'll make one. No,
exactly.
That's your responsibility, is to make the work that you're passionate about and believe in, and then it's us to kind of go, okay, I think that's what's relevant, or that's what's relevant.
Well, that's the interesting thing. The thing that I love about being a part of this experience as well is being able to notice the difference and actually know, like, being conscious of going, oh yeah, so this is what they're asking for. I can make a work like that, and it's not going to affect my artistic practice. It's just like I do like the business side of this industry that as artists we don't necessarily get to learn, and so it's not really detrimental to the cause. I think it's just, for me, it's just going, oh yeah, I can just make a quick buck from that. That's great. That's awesome. It's good, useful to know. It's not going to be like a horrible work for me. It's not going to be draining. It's just going to be something that's a little bit surface. That's fine. Which then creates more resources for me to do what I actually want to do. So I don't know. I like both.
I think there's the fundamental to that, isn't it? Is that sort of is knowing what. It's a two-way thing, isn't it? A performance. There's what you want and what the audience want, and you've got to take acknowledgement of both of those. What I like about the Honey Pot is the fact that a lot of the time bookers and presenters are faceless. You hear they've been to your show, you don't know what they think of it. They might have loved it, they might have hated it, but there's something quite wonderful about being able to go into a room where people are there and you can say to them, what do you think of my show? And they can say, well, it was crap, or they can go, we would have booked it, but you had some references. My personal experience was, I had a show which I had there was an artistic director from a New York theatre came to see my show, and I'd heard on the grapevine, I think one of the sort of door people said he'd really liked the show, but then had gone. Now, if that had been Edinburgh, I'd have never seen him again. But the fact was, I came to the Honey Pot and he was there, and I said, "Oh, I heard you saw my show." And he said, "Yeah, I liked it, but there's for a New York audience, you need to be a bit longer, and And I said, "Well, I can make it longer, And he sort of said, "Well, no, all right." And then sort of. And like you were saying, Erin, you back it up a few days later. I bumped into him again in the Fringe Club bar about 3 or 4 days later, and I said, "What you said was really interesting, and I think you're exactly correct. Yes, I've decided I can make those changes that you suggested, and you are a genius." And so I told him what I thought about his changes, and then he said, "All right," he said, "Write them, send it to me." And on the back of that, we had a 2.5 month run in New York, which was great. And I think I love that generally about the Adelaide Fringe. It's very informal. there's it's the whole process is demystified. You don't just have artists and sort of bookers. You know, you all, if you want to, you can make a point of getting to know each other, and by doing that, you can give a life to your work in a way which you don't get at Edinburgh. I mean, I go to Edinburgh every year. I've done 17 of them, and it's just too huge. I think one thing actually that I think is really important for Adelaide Fringe, and I really hope I know the Fringe Club has been sort of cancelled this year for COVID reasons, and you know, 2 months ago, I didn't know if the festival was going to go on at all, or the Fringe is going to go on at all, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons why the Fringe Club ended. But I mean, the Fringe Club is a great place to back up the conversations that you've had at Honey Pot, and I think it actually makes it made it more of a family community, you know, because I mean, I don't know what venues you guys are performing at, but you know, you'd probably gravitate to the Fringe Club. If I saw you in the Fringe Club tonight, we'd probably have a beer and we'd all chat, and I think that's been one of the sad things about a COVID festival. It's been amazing. I think Adelaide have done brilliantly putting it on this year, and it's been a huge success from what I can see. But from a performance perspective, I'd like that sort of central meeting point, I think.
I mean, that's the big thing about, and you know, thinking about having this conversation, I was like, oh, yeah, it's this year's different, isn't it? Though, you know, because that's the thing, and you kind of you know that it's the chance conversations you have at the club or wandering around any of the festival hub areas, and it's the chance meetings you have with someone over a drink. That's actually the kind, you know, the organised meetings you have are great. The way Honey Pot works, as you say, is so much more of the encounters at a foyer, in the bar, in everywhere, and the recurrent ones and the accidental things. And that's kind of the lovely thing about it. And that's the lovely thing about any of these kind of markets that we all are kind of craving. You know, I think going back to earlier conversations about what, you know, a pitch is, it's so much about the kind of the trust and the relationships, and you don't make them that easily over a Zoom call. You make them in person at an event like this, and over, you know, ideally over a couple of years, and that's how you build those, you know. And as you say, 3 meetings later, you had it booked, you know. And if it was just the show, that might have been where it ended.
And I'm guessing as well, actually, Chris, for somebody like yourself, you might see somebody and think, well, I like their act, but it's not right for me this year. But you keep an eye on them for the year after.
And look, that's exactly right. You know, mostly the shows that I'm seeing, you know, is really looking at the people and looking at how how their work's developing, and and what, it might not be specifically that show, but it is then going, oh, okay, but actually, the next one, or someone says, oh no, but actually you should have seen the one, something they did last year that I didn't see, whatever that is, but having conversations about artists with peers as well.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Is there anything that the Honey Pot could do going forward to make it sort of? How can it be improved? I mean, it's the best I've seen in World Fringe by a long way. I do fringes all over the place, and I'm consistently, one of the reasons I consistently come back to Adelaide is because of the Honey Pot. But is there I mean, what do we think it can improve on? Can it improve?
I think it's more like I was going to say time, but it's mostly that's just personally because I don't have any time because I'm a dickhead. I'm doing too many things. It's like 7 shows a day. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's much that can be improved, to be completely honest. It's probably maybe from like a no. I can't even answer that question, to be honest. Yeah, I can't see any improvement from my perspective.
One thing I'd really, I mean, I and the Honey Pot are good at this. But sort of, I'd like to know instantly, or sort of straight after a show, whether somebody's been in. Normally you can find out, but it'll take 2 or 3 days, and because you want to do the follow-up call and sort of like, the follow-up.
You want to hound them down in the bar later on that night.
Yeah.
Find them.
Yeah.
I mean, just thinking about the benefits of Honey Pot again more, like I think just thinking it through when I was getting ready for today as well, is that something that's been really helpful for me is that it also is an opportunity to get your work reflected back at you. And for so many in Fringe, we don't have producers. I was fortunate to have a contract producer for Egg last year, which meant that when I went to the Honey Pots, I had somebody who could actually speak really positively about the work, because still as an artist, I find that a strange thing to be like, I'm getting better at it, but having to sell it and it be me and it also be autobiographical. So it's like very much me. So having just somebody else to be like, she's great. The show's great was really nice. But the other thing that's been really great is that like even just you before saying, oh, that's actually really interesting, contemporary dance and comedy, like getting that reflection by being your own producer, you start to learn how to communicate and talk about your work, which Honey Pot provides such an opportunity for because there is so many contexts of conversation.
And it's the peers from around the country and beyond and internationally. You know, I say that now just because we're a bit more limited in who's able to come this year, but you've made it around the globe, which is amazing. But yeah, having peers from around the country, you know, or just being able to reflect back on and have those artistic conversations around your work is really vital. I mean, so I would say, and you know, actually having, for obvious reasons, missed the last two, but having been like 5 or 6 before that, Honeypots, the networking conversations, you know, structured networking, informal networking, all that variety of things. So, you know, that's what's lovely. And, you know, it's hard when right now we've got less and all the restrictions and masks and but when, you know, assuming next year, you know, I hope that we have lots more of those events because different contexts work for different people at different times of the day. So, you know, I remember, you know, sometimes there's a mid-morning brunch networking one, there's a late afternoon around beers, kind of just rolling tables, and, you know, those different events are, you know, over different weeks is really lovely because then you do get to have all those kind of conversations, the random ones and the slightly more structured ones.
Yeah. And there's another element, isn't there, as well, of Honey Pot, which is you'll get journalists there as well, won't you? Sometimes you'll get local radio stations and you get an access to the press, which again is kind of quite demystifying. You can speak directly to people that who are assessing your show, and you know, sometimes it's good just to sort of hear why people don't like your show sometimes. You know, I mean, sort of like, you know, a member of the press might tell you that. Or... I think
that's definitely useful. You reminded me though that actually the first Adelaide Fringe I was at was in 2000, so it's before Honey Pot. And what's lovely is not just getting that, but getting the peers now so much more through these kind of environments. Whereas I think, but you know, back then you might have got the one review or 1 or 2 reviews if you're lucky, and it's like, oh, what if they're not that good? So it's lovely to kind of have all the networking opportunities and your peers around to be able to support that and to be able to support you and kind of go, oh yeah, but I thought that.
Yeah, and I think also just reflecting on it, I think there is also, you know, if you look at other arts markets that are purely arts markets, it can be pretty intense, the kind of constant pitching, and it's very kind of one tone. I think what I've really enjoyed taking part in over the last little while is some of the, I guess, more professional development or that kind of the extra things as well, because you do, again, in a Fringe, you're kind of mostly self-produced, so it's that kind of opportunity to learn a little bit more and see how other shows are going as opposed to just pitching, which is kind of like a whole other game.
Yeah, this is not a pitching kind of context at all, which is not a formal, you know, and I'd spent a lot of my, you know, in normal years, a lot of my time kind of in a formal context pitching, and it's Honey Pot's just a lovely relief from that. Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, I'm just want to pick up on something you said there, Erin. Do you think in the modern sort of arts marketplace, performers have to be producers as well?
I mean, in some ways, I'd love to have a producer if there's anybody out there. At the same time, I'm definitely the kind of artist that wears many hats, and I really like to be directly involved. And actually, one of the biggest difficulties with the producer I had last year was that she was like, give me things to do, and I didn't know how to relinquish control because I was so used to it. And also, again, autobiographical work, and, you know, I mean, even if it's not autobiographical, you kind of really care. I mean, I don't know. I think it's always great for artists to know what the producing side is, because I think if you've done something, you know what it consists of and how you can then support a producer. And I think that if you can evolve to then have producing support, that's great. But I also think there's this kind of sense that if I get a producer, I won't have to do any of that. But ultimately, the artists are still having to generate all of that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it probably depends where you're at. Yeah.
Because Thomas, you produce many acts, don't you? I mean, you know, House of Kong there's quite a big collective of you now, aren't there? that come from there?
Yeah, like I think it's tricky for me because the word producing, even just in terms of the works that I make, because lots of my own personal work really comes from where I come from, and so the word producing and also having not necessarily control, because the biggest base value for any sort of POC Indigenous Black person is reciprocity, like sharing, and the thing is it's storytelling, and so trying to find people that I can trust in terms of selling the work in the right way, also adhering to protocol. Like it's just another set of rules, or just like a whole other process, for myself as an artist, but then also as a producer to adhere to, because it's a community that will keep me accountable, to the work and who we're pitching it to, who it's for. It's like another complicated process. So I think Honey Pot's been great for me to really look at, what's right for me, as an artist, and what tools are useful in my toolkit. So, it's all useful. It's all relative. But I think in the works that I make, like there's a specific community that I make my work for, first and foremost, before it's open to the larger community. So, yeah.
But I was reading your biography. Now you're doing an amazing thing. I mean, you take people in who've been rejected by their communities and by their family, and so it's more than just producing a show. You're doing an amazing thing. I absolutely take my hat off to you. You're sort of providing a life for people who have gone through some incredibly difficult circumstances, and so as a producer, that adds on an extra layer. You're not just sort of selling a show, you're actually helping people out of some real difficulties.
Well, I think that the beautiful thing about that, thank you for saying that, is, one of my biggest passions, not only as an artist, but my biggest sort of the thing about my work is I try to really model this idea of lateral leadership, which is inherently from World Indigenous people. Our elders sit in the round, and so everyone has equal voice, equal time to be heard, seen, and they're implementing action together. And so with the House of Kong, like I'm using this. It's something I've been studying. Like I read my master's, I wrote a thesis around Indigenous leadership in business, and so my PhD is based on that as well, which is going to take me a little bit of time. But I think what I try to do with the House of Kong is really model that style of leadership, and it's also something that informs my process as an artist. Like when I'm creating work, something about myself is I do have a team of people that help hold me accountable, because it's not possible for one person to hold the roof up over anyone. So it's a big part of the process. It's also a part of the way that I make work and storytelling. So first and foremost about the community, the needs of the community, and how I can use my platform and voice to, affect action. So, yeah.
No, it's a brilliant thing. I mean, and so, going forward, I presume sort of you're going to be doing shows at other festivals internationally, and you've done that already. How do other fringes and festivals compare to what you have at Adelaide? I mean, sort of like, why is the Adelaide Fringe for you guys so special?
Oh, well, I can speak to this. Like, I think as an artist, like, as I said, like I'm doing a lot of shows, and it's because usually when you're an artist and you're writing grants, you put a bunch of them out hoping that you get one. Like this year I got every single one that I wrote, which is amazing. But I think the beautiful thing about that, it's not necessarily about how amazing I am at writing, because I am, but it was also like the Fringe is making it super accessible for artists, especially now in this climate, to get out and make work. And I think for us, it is like what I try to do with my house is I encourage them to get up on stage or to use what's going on, speak about it on stage. Like it's important to exercise it this way. It's a healthy way to process trauma for myself. And so I think the best thing about Adelaide Fringe is that they're making things super accessible for us to make work and for us to get our stories out there, to be seen, but also to get, to be reflected on and have conversations with people that can help you push your work further and take it to the next level.
And is that true of yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been doing shows in the Fringe for, I think it's now 12 years. I think I started, 2009 was my first. And so I definitely don't take it for granted being an artist from Adelaide, that I can literally take part in this festival, and having toured to fringes around the world where you've also got the joy and the struggle of traveling and accommodation. And with Femme, I toured that solely on my own, and I ran the show from inside the tent, which is the set, and dragged this bloody tent all around the world. And in Edinburgh, I have a giant ladder as the set piece, and a friend who was the caretaker of a church said I could go and get this ladder, so carried this giant 6-meter ladder through Edinburgh. And they're all great stories, but ultimately, like, being able to have access to an international fringe community in Adelaide where I can go home at the end of the day is something that I would try and make the most of every year, because it really is, we've got it really good here.
I think it's very supportive, isn't it? Sort of like in South Australia generally, because I find that with Edinburgh, it's so aggressive as a marketplace. The shows that sell, very often the people are the best at giving out flyers, or you get sort of fringe company. You can put your poster up, and within 2 hours it's covered by another one, or there's people along the Royal Mile, and it's just a seething mass of people in costumes trying to drag you into the shows, and there can be some really good work that gets lost there. And I think I find it a lot more supportive here, actually.
That's the word I was going to use as well. Like, as someone coming to see work, I make a point to come to Adelaide Fringe wherever you can, because it is a really supportive community, and I think it's the same as any open access fringes. There's an awful lot of work to see, in a great, in a good way, but it does mean someone coming and you're kind of like, I have no idea, wood for the trees, but because it's a very supportive, because there's a kind of a strong pool of acts locally and around the country, because you've got people like, in the Honey Pot team to kind of go, oh, actually, we know what you're interested in, help kind of guide the viewing experience of someone coming in. That makes quite a lot of difference. You're kind of not just shooting blind when you come here. You're actually able to have and these structured events alongside it make it a much more enjoyable experience, to come as a delegate.
Yeah. And with your delegate's hat on, actually, I think we've been talking from very often from an artistic perspective here, and sort of like sharing ideas and what we might do. Do delegates do the same sort of thing? Do we say, totally. This type of show doesn't work in?
Yeah. So we'll talking and going, no, I think actually you should go and see this, and this might be good for your context. Absolutely, yeah. So the conversations between delegates. About what we're seeing is just as important as the conversations with artists, because that helps us steer, the advice from other people helps us to steer what we should see.
So as a delegate, will you go and visit lots of international fringes and festivals just to sort of get a feel of what?
Look, I don't get to that many international fringes because really my focus is for critical stages and touring Australian work around regional Australia. So it's really focused on going to the Australian fringes and festivals.
And do the other Australian fringes and festivals copy Adelaide a lot? Because it's kind of like the gold standard, isn't it, for fringe over?
Yeah, but Adelaide still stands out. I think there's still, this maybe it's just the longevity. I think it still stands out. And I'm sorry to other fringe festivals.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
but I think and I think Honey Pot's been going 15 years. It takes longer to build that. I think Sydney's working on things like that, and but it doesn't yet have that kind of same. It doesn't have the same Honey Pot kind of mentality kind of going yet. And to be fair, the last couple of years is hardly a good comparative point for anyone. But there are conversations that are going in some of the other fringe festivals, in Sydney and Melbourne, and there is that kind of mentality. But I think it's also the timing's particularly fabulous here in Adelaide. And Adelaide's a great city to get around for a fringe. I've been becoming particularly fond, and I remember this 3 years ago, I've been becoming particularly fond of the scooting across from one end of town to the other, to get from Holden Street to the Mill to back to there. It's the best way to get around.
It's true, actually, isn't it? 'Cause I find that with places like Sydney, there's also so much going on. And I think sort of like when the Fringe is on, it is the biggest show in town.
It's just too big a city for the Fringe to take over.
Yeah.
But here the Fringe has taken over. and that's what's on in town right now is the Fringe. You can't walk anywhere without knowing. I can't imagine Adelaide, people in Adelaide don't know about it. But in Sydney, the Fringe, it's too big a city to take over the whole town.
There's a curious relationship there, isn't there? I mean, I think most people in Adelaide love it, but then you get a few people who genuinely don't realise what they've got. I mean, with my international hat on, it's the second biggest in the world. People want to come to this one. I think sort of the only comparable thing I think in the Southern Hemisphere is the Melbourne Comedy Festival, which if you're a comedian, that's where you want to go, by and large. But for all other arts, I think for Cabaret actually, I can't think of anywhere much better than Adelaide. Actually, is that? I mean, sort of. I think in Edinburgh there's a lot, but it tends to get a bit lost, doesn't it, Cabaret? There's so much going on there that sort of it's not. Whereas here, it's kind of like. It's one of the things you must do at the Fringe here, I think. I don't know. I mean, how did you both had experience of Edinburgh, haven't you? How did you feel that was for sort of Cabaret?
I mean, I've had pretty minimal experience of Edinburgh. I've done 2 very short impromptu seasons and had full intentions to take Femme there in 2020 and then Egg, and they've been paused. But my whole show is a dedication to moving to Edinburgh, so I'm hoping that just will put it out to the universe that it will get there at some point in time. So yeah, I mean, I can't comment on that too much, but yeah, I do think that Adelaide really celebrates the Cabaret and has some of the best in the world. I mean, Thomas, you can probably speak to that.
No, absolutely. I think, for me, I think the difference, and this is just purely from my perspective, I think over in Edinburgh, they're a lot more used to Cabaret, I think. I think culturally speaking, I think they are used to seeing drag queens or seeing, that kind of work, whereas I think in Australia we're still kind of getting used to it, or coming to terms with seeing a 6'5" Samoan drag queen running down the street because she's late to her gig. You know what I mean? Like in full hair, it's still a little bit intimidating. So it's almost like being based in Adelaide, like during March, we do get like a hall pass, and so I think culturally speaking, it's sort of like really exciting, a little bit intimidating, very scary. So yeah, I think it's a lot more exciting because they're still getting accustomed to Cabaret in this sort of format, if that makes sense.
I found it funny. I saw Paul McDermott the other night. Great show. He's finished now, sadly. But he was berating the audience for being very conservative. And I thought, it's a full house and they're all watching you, mate. They're not that conservative.
There is a degree of conservatism in Adelaide, though, that you do notice. And I think you work with that and, but it can have its challenges. It's an interesting one because unlike other cities which maybe are a little more open-minded or accessible, we also sort of, as incredible as it is, we also have this mentality of arts happens in Mad March, and then we don't sustain a culture of seeing diversity in various acts in town year round, and that being a part of our identity as opposed to this almost like entertainment for people for a month, which is still a strange.
Maybe it's that transformative nature at this time. Yeah, the city just has to transform for a moment, and 6-foot Samoan running down the street in full dress. In Sydney that happens.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so normalised in other places.
That's
so
right,
yeah, definitely here in South Australia, it's envelope pushing.
But also, I mean, it's kind of I kind of it's easy to forget how quickly Adelaide has transformed. I mean, because it wasn't that long ago. It was biennial, wasn't it? And now it's sort of like this annual thing, and it's become. I mean, certainly for me, it's become a must-do Fringe because it's a place to showcase. It counts for something if you've done well here, I don't know. Is there going to be a danger of over Fringe saturation, though? Because I think a lot of other cities have seen what's going on here and they're copying it. And like now back home, it used to be just the Edinburgh Festival. And now there's a Leicester Comedy Festival and there's the Vault Festival and there's festivals in Manchester and Brighton. And they're all over the country. And I just wonder if there's a danger of Fringe saturation. And I think it's very important. I think it's important for the South Australian government to get behind the Fringe and really push this brand because this is a standout one. If it doesn't push it, there's a danger that some of the other cities might take away some of the appeal of what is a very special event here.
I mean, I think it makes sense that we're finding more festivals, cropping up, and it's the same here, and it's the same in lots of parts. Just said it was a New Zealand arts market that I was at virtually, but there's more and more, in regional festivals popping up there, which is great. Not all popping up. There's some that have been regular, but which makes sense because right now critical mass makes it, which is what we're talking about here. That critical mass that we're all in the same place at the same time is part of the wonderful experience of enjoying art. And I know lots of the context, the conversations we're having is, oh yeah, but what context could you produce that work in somewhere else? And a festival context or a fringe context makes perfect sense to kind of go, oh well, yeah, that, because as you say, you love the experience of going to fringes. So that's the kind of context you're looking for. So I can understand that. I think from my perspective, I'm very interested. What we do when we're taking shows touring is then go, well, that was great in that context. How would we then translate and tour that? And how would we make sure that the artists involved are getting a wage and a living and an income from that work for X amount of time? And I think that's the danger with the kind of, this is more like looking at replicating the fringe model, not a festival. Festival being critical mass doesn't, hopefully people are all getting paid. But if it's the fringe context where that's kind of happening as opportunities to showcase and network and do all this, but if that's happening everywhere, then that is the risk for the artists, because you need to balance these opportunities with then the moments where you're actually going, oh yeah, now I'm actually making a living from my art. And so that's kind of the interesting kind of, how we segue from these, not every, but, because there's the risk. There's obviously the risk in the fringe context as well. And
I think the more fringe festivals there are, the more temptation as an independent to do that.
I've got to be at that one. I've got to be at that one too. I've got to be at that one.
Yeah, and I've been thinking in the last sort of 10 minutes or so that I think it is still important to acknowledge that it's really difficult at the moment. So while we're talking about how great Fringe and Honey Pot are and like how incredible that they've been able to pull these things off, there are a lot of artists that haven't been able to present their shows this year due to various reasons. And like I did a shorter season at the beginning of the Fringe of Egg because I was anticipating a major project happening at the end of the Fringe. I was developing a drive-in, and we were going to have all these performances at the drive-in, a COVID-safe model, and we just couldn't get it up at this particular time. And so for me as an artist, it's actually the first 3 weeks things filled in, but it's really difficult at the moment. And I want to be aware of an audience watching this or other artists that like we're talking about the positive sides of what's all out there, but like it's really hard, and I'm losing money, and like. And I have the privilege of having had some successful runs at Fringe. I have the Fringe behind me. I know that my show is being talked about. For new artists, it's a really, really difficult time to enter that. And so I think it's important to reinforce that like that is the reality.
And
at
we
the
were
moment.
talking about audience appetite for things. And, and I've sat in the couple of shows I've seen have been happily, lovely and full. But there's an element of, there's considerable risk for everyone involved at this time. And risk, there's a show I'm supposed to see tonight, which of course is cancelled because someone's a close contact. And that's the other risk that the artists have at the moment. Heart goes out to that kind of context at the moment. There's a risk for audiences, there's a risk for artists. It's not.
You want to cling to what it is that we have and how exciting it is to be in a room with live performance, but I also don't want to negate the fact that it's a really difficult.
And I think too, like adding to what everyone's saying, like, and you did say this, like, it is important that the state government gets behind the festival. Exactly. And, for the past couple of years, we have received a bit of extra money as artists. They've poured $2 million across 2 years. Both years to Adelaide Fringe, which has then gone into the Artist Fund for grants. And so obviously I've been a successful applicant of those grants. And, we hope that support continues, because without that support during this pandemic, none of the shows probably would have gone up. I wouldn't have done anything, to be honest. Yeah. So.
And I think, I was having a conversation with someone this morning, and we're kind of going, we're at year 3, and there's a kind of a danger that the governments that have been giving us this support to keep going over this time are actually thinking it's all over. And it's really not yet.
None of us have any extra resources now. It's like all of that has been used. And the Fringe has been one of my main professional supporters in the last 2 years. And that's been significant, It's, important that they get the support.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think... from my personal perspective as well, sort of like I've had to adapt my act significantly because of the circumstances. Because normally I'd bring a team of actors out, and it was just too much of a risk. Because if one of them got sick, then the whole project would have to be cancelled. So I thought, if it's just me, and I'm performing, I don't normally perform doing my stuff, but I thought if it's just me and I get sick, I'm only paying for one flight and one set of accommodation and not for 3, and so yeah. Yeah, but I'm cautiously optimistic. We're going to get through this, and sort of, and it's great to hear that you have had support, and you know, what I know of your acts is well deserved. I mean, you know, you're great. So, you know, can I ask you a question, Chris? When you're looking to tour things, are fringe acts suitable, or or when you're touring things? I mean, if you're going to sort of like bigger theatres beyond the Fringe, do people expect more bells and whistles, more members of the cast, bigger sets? Do they expect to sort of a show rather than sort of, let's say, one stand up on the...
Yeah, it's a good question. And look, it varies. And I think for us, because I can have a kind of a suite of different offerings, then I am looking to have a balance of things, so that, you know, I can't have all one person shows, but, you know, very happy to have some of them. And it is nice for a one person show with some bells and whistles as well. It's great. But yeah, you know, I think that's the thing, as you point out, and a lot of people don't always realize that, but mostly the venues that we're touring to are much larger. You know, it's going to be scaling up. It's going to be scaling up to, you know, at the smallest to a 200 seat studio, and probably to a 600 seat quite large regional venue. So, you know, you might need to have a bit of set to go with it. But you know, I have found work, and we do tour work from Fringe festivals, definitely.
I can probably jump in and speak to that a little bit. With Femme, that started as a show at the Mill, which is a 50-person seat venue, definitely Fringe show, and programmers from the Adelaide Festival Centre came to that, and then 2 years later, with COVID barring, we had a full season at the Adelaide Festival Centre in the Space Theatre, and so I got funding, and part of that funding application was saying it's kind of rare for a Fringe show to get a main stage, not uncommon, and so we were then able to add extra lighting and set and that kind of thing. Exactly. So the Fringe really gave me that platform for them to see the Fringe version and go, we'd love to.
And there are, you know, the good thing about Adelaide is there are venues large and small, and there's works of different contexts for family and adult and cabaret, and you can and when we're looking at building a tour, we always have to plan for some kind of remount. So in this context, it's like, well, let's have that conversation about what the set should be now. You know, I like to think of things that concertina, because sometimes you want to have a work that actually goes to lots of community halls or spaces that aren't much bigger than that. It can be really great. You know, depends on the context we're looking for.
Do you help acts get that funding?
What's that?
Do you help acts get the funding to scale up?
Yeah. That's part of what we'll do, is then to kind of, you know, if it's however many venues or presenters, but then to be able to build that touring support. Yeah.
So someone was pitching to you at a conjectural honeypot. Should they say, give us some money?
Yeah. Well, it'd be like, you know, you then with our model, at least, it'd be like, then you partner with us, kind of, you know, we welcome you into the family, and then we work with you to put all that together.
What have you got touring in the near future?
We got a bit. We've got a show called King of Pigs. That started, you know, in the old Fitz, was a tiny pub venue in the part of a pub in Sydney, and so, you know, so that's totally Fringe context. It was in Warrnambool in Victoria last night. Sadly, does not have its show in Lismore in northern New South Wales tomorrow. Yes. Which is tragically very damaged venue. So they have a few days off. So our first cancellation for the year, not due to COVID, but they will pick up their tour.
What are you looking for this festival?
What are we looking for?
Yeah, I can recommend a show called Egg. I can recommend.
That's right. I'm looking for both these shows.
Done.
Yeah. Looking for something just completely different, and that speaks to the time. You know, I guess the things that always jump out to me is like, okay, is it relevant, resonant? Is it going to talk to a broad audience, or is it going to have some really exciting offering? You know, and just some amazing artists. People who, for me, it's also people who genuinely want the experience of different audiences, of diverse audiences, of regional audiences, particularly in that mix. Then that's, you know, when you go, if someone's really excited about having that and taking their work and that what they are offering to a broad audience, then that gets me really excited.
Cool, fantastic. Now we should, at this final point, we should be. Can we get you to tell us that your final shows? How many have you got left? You've got.
So my shows that I'm producing, I've
Yeah.
got 2 left. So
Yeah.
I've got Black Pudding, which opens tomorrow night for our press preview, and Brown Sissy Boy, which is my solo one-woman show, which is next Saturday. But Black Pudding, it's basically looking at the concept of remorse. It's a dance work. It's how I've categorized it, and it's looking at the concept of remorse if we eliminate the words "I am sorry" from the world and replace them with artistic defense mechanisms, which are super performative. Yeah, so each character will represent, like, there'll be projection, denial, lots of real there's lots of stupidity on stage with a really heavy theme, but will make you laugh and
Wow.
make you think about some stuff. Yeah.
So a real mix of tone in it.
Yeah, and so there's drag, there's circus in it, there's a bit of cabaret, some singing. But the thing about the work is, as well, is like the thing that prompted the work, in my language of Samoan language, there's no word for sorry. Because it's not a word. You don't say you're sorry. You show that you're sorry. It's an action. And so when I was thinking about something that happened to me last year during the Fringe, the word Black Pudding, which is where the work comes from, was a review that was written. This is my response to what it is. It was very performative, and it was a defense mechanism that I was received with. So I went, I'm going to make a song. I'm going to make a song and dance about it, and use this as a means to speak about the concept of remorse, the larger issue rather than the individual. So Black Pudding, come see it.
Fantastic. And Erin, you've got you're going to be doing some shows at the end of the festival, aren't you? You're coming back for an encore, are you? With
I was hoping to. I'm not sure I'll be able to do an encore of Egg itself, but Egg, the character, may be making an appearance in a cabaret show that's on Saturday mornings that Kween Kong might be a part of, whose name might be smashed.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap up there. I just want to.
And you have a show on.
Oh, well, I have got a show. Yes, it's called Afghanistan is Not Funny. And it's a theatre show on Holden Street. And it basically talks about the time I went to Afghanistan straight after the war. I nearly got blown up by a landmine. I got abducted by the Mujahideen. And I had a machine gun pointed at me by American troops researching a show. But yeah, it's gone okay. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you very much, folks. It's been a treat and a joy. It's been lovely meeting you all. I'll tell you what. I hope we see you at the Honey Pot for a cup of tea and a bit of a pitching session.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
folks. Cheers.